What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, April 18th, 2019. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. And getting right on into the news here. First of all, this is, again, it's the 18th. Tomorrow's the 19th, which is Patriots Day. And Patriots Day is known as the anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord, which is seen as the start of the American Revolution. This is when the British authorities decided to basically confiscate the military-style weapons of the American Patriots. Now, it's interesting. The other day, I heard this commentary saying that back in the revolutionary times, there was no difference between military weapons and hunting weapons. That's not exactly true. Military weapons were basically set aside and not used, so they weren't worn out when they were needed for battle. They were also well regulated, and by regulation, that meant they had good sights on them, good working sights. Regulation back then was a mechanical rather than a legal term. So the colonials had stockpiled weapons for military use. They still had their ordinary rifles that they used for target shooting and for hunting and putting food on the table. The British decided they were going to confiscate those military-style weapons, and basically they got their rear ends peppered with a lot of lead shot. And that was the beginning of the American Revolution. Patriots Day, of course, is also the day that the U.S. government went on in and gassed that church full of women and children to death with a poison gas that is illegal to use on enemy troops in warfare down in Waco, Texas. And it's also the anniversary of the false flag bombing of the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, which destroyed all the paperwork related to Waco before Congress could hold a formal investigation into what was going on there. So a lot of things happen on April 19th, and so we'll see if maybe tomorrow is a quiet day or not. Okay, so anyway, getting on to other stories. As you know, there's a lot of attention still being focused on Julian Assange. And a lot of people they're really very sympathetic to his situation. They're very upset with the government, not just of the United States, but of Great Britain and even of Ecuador, for the way they are treating him in contravention of international law. And so a lot of people are out there trying to exploit the Assange story for their own political agenda. And it's interesting to watch the liberals who claim to be sympathetic to Assange. They seem to be more concerned about his persecution's effect on their careers, that is, on their ability to publish, than on Assange himself personally. Now, 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy, pursued around the globe by governments eager to win Washington's favor, denounced by leading Clintonite apologist Neera Tandem as a fascist, and excoriated by conservatives as a traitor. Assange probably, understandably, feels very much alone these days. But you know, one of these days, these spoiled children of the oligarchy who don't really understand what fascism truly is, they're going to have to deal with real fascism, and it isn't going to be pretty. People are throwing around these labels recklessly, like fascist and, you know, Hitler and Nazi. They don't really know what they're talking about. They absolutely do not. It's just, I was talking about it yesterday, this lack of civility brought about by the internet. Oh, you're Hitler, you're a Nazi, you're this, you're that. And they don't really understand what they're talking about. And when they're confronted with the reality, which I think is on the horizon, boy, are they in for a shock. Now, Roger Waters, who's Pink Floyd's frontman, is out there cheering Assange on and saying the whole world needs to pay attention to what's going on here. And it isn't just because it's Julian Assange. This is an attack on freedom of speech. It's an attack on dissent. It's an attack on the right to criticize government that is acting with our money and our name to commit war crimes. And obviously, we have a right to say, please don't do that. And the government is taking the position. No, no, no. We're going to take your money. We're going to take your kids. We're going to fight these wars. And you just sit down and shut up. And you don't complain about anything we're doing because we're here to win. And if that means having to torture people and use biological weapons, well, that's just bad things happen in war. And if you're a real American patriot, you'll just go along with all of this stuff. And you know, the fact that we're making war on all these countries that really haven't attacked us yet, well, it's just the cost of doing business and getting access to their oil and controlling what currency the oil is sold for. That's their attitude. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So what is Julian Assange going to do? We know he's got one ace in the hole, and that, of course, is the DNC information. How he got the DNC emails. Now, the official story, of course, is Russia hacked it, Russia hacked it, Russia hacked it, gave it to WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks published it, and that's how Russia interfered with the election and stole the election from Hillary Clinton, who rightfully should have been the president of the United States of America if it weren't for that evil Donald Trump and all those people who supported him. Of course, there are reasons to suspect this wasn't a hack. It was an internal leak. And Assange could confirm that. He has all but outed Seth Rich as the leak. In previous interviews, he's come on out and basically implied strongly this was an internal leak. It wasn't an exterior hack. Now, I still think that Assange is going to get offered a deal, which is that if he says Russia hacked the DNC emails, if he basically supports the official story, the official lie, they will go lightly on him, or at least that will be the promise to him. But on the other hand, he could just come on out at his first public interview, and at some point they're going to have to let him talk to the public. They can't keep him incommunicado. Somebody's going to file a habeas corpus on him. And he's going to come out and say, you know, by the way, the DNC emails were leaked. It was not a hack. Russia had nothing to do with it. And that would just pull the rug out from under what's left of the Mueller report, which came on out, and the entire Democratic Party. Assange is in a position to destroy them. It's rather reckless that the United States wanted him back at this particular time, because he's basically their equivalent of a petard. He could blow up right in the faces of the Democratic establishment. So we'll see what happens with that. And the big question is going to be, given how Donald Trump lauded WikiLeaks and Assange during the campaign, would Trump pardon Assange? If Trump pardons Assange, then Assange can take down the Democratic Party. So if anybody from the White House is listening to this show, you might want to pass that along. If Trump pardons Julian Assange, then Assange is free to say Russia did not hack the DNC emails. They were an internal leak, and that will absolutely destroy the credibility of the Democratic Party going into 2020. Just think about that very carefully. As you know, following Assange's arrest, the International Monetary Fund loaned $4.2 billion to Ecuador under very favorable terms. This has actually prompted riots in Ecuador over Assange's arrest. They're seeing President Moreno as corrupted by the U.S., and saying that he sold out Assange for money, which, yes, it's exactly what it looks like happened. That $4.2 billion, that was effectively blood money. So, oh my goodness, okay. All right, I was just looking at the Fox News, and apparently Anna Nicole Smith has passed away at age 39. I think, no, that was the other Playmate of the Year that I worked with. Anyway, getting on over to Notre Dame, they're starting to finally get back in there, get the debris cleared away, get a much better review of what was damaged, what can be saved. A lot of it turns out a lot of the artwork was actually in better shape than originally feared. A lot of it's been sent off to the Louvre for restoration. A lot of the relics are now at the Paris City Hall in their vaults for safekeeping. And they're narrowing in on electrical short circuit on some of the equipment that was up on the roof where they were repairing that spire, and saying that that looks like that's what started the blaze. And of course, they're still having to work remotely because of safety reasons. They still can't get up there to the roof, but they're saying, you know, they're basically inside Notre Dame. They're shoring up the interior with timbering to make sure it's stable before they go on in there and begin the reconstruction. Now, Donald Trump called Pope Francis to offer reconstruction support for Notre Dame, and basically said, we're offering the help of our great experts on renovation and construction, ignoring the fact that the very top experts in the world on this kind of restoration of historic buildings were the ones who were on the job, and apparently at least suspected by the French police of having made a huge, huge mistake. And Trump wished both Pope Francis and President Macron a very happy Easter. And yeah, that's got to be a bittersweet ending to what's going on. Sunday, of course, is Easter Sunday, and that's one of the two big shows, if you will, of any Christian church along with Christmas. So I don't know what Notre Dame is planning on doing. Maybe they'll just have seats out in the courtyard and hold their Easter service there. But it's expected it's going to be about 5 years before it's fully reconstructed. And I'm going to take a wild guess here and say it's going to be at least 6 months before they can hold services inside the cathedral itself. All right, a lot of people still going back and forth over what was saved and what was damaged. And again, little confirmation, this is from CNN this time, the rose windows are safe. And these are, you know, icons of the cathedral, these immense circular stained glass windows that go back to the 13th century. And the Paris Fire Brigade is saying the cathedral stone construction has been saved, along with the main works of art. And of course, there's a lot of concern about how much water damage there is from the attempts to put the fire out. But again, could have been worse. It could have been a lot worse. The whole thing could have collapsed. You know, but they've got the rose windows are intact. The organ has been slightly damaged. They're going to get that back together. I mean, it was renovated only 20 years ago. So it's not like that was a relic of the medieval period, although some of the pipes are. The New York Times has had a little bit of a whoopsie. They produced a video supposedly about the fire at Notre Dame, and they opened it up with a video about the cathedral in Cologne, Germany. And it led to jokes about how to Americans, every cathedral looks the same, which is not entirely true. Now, I've never been to Notre Dame, but I have been to the Duomo in Milan, and that was just amazing. Even for somebody who is not religious, they are emotionally overpowering. And I was very impressed. I was very, very impressed. All right, French President Macron is now using the Notre Dame blaze to push for national unity. And basically, it's cynical. For politicians, it's all disasters can be used for potential political gain. But it does seem like Notre Dame has pulled the French people together. Whether it's going to quell the Yellow Vest protests or not, we don't know. Now, meanwhile, over in the West Bank of Israel, there's this rabbi, Shlomo Avner, who was actually born in France, who is claiming that the Notre Dame fire may be a divine punishment because the first big public burning of the Talmud was in Paris in the plaza of the Notre Dame Cathedral. This prompted responses from other rabbis in Israel saying that there is no mitzvah for burning churches in other lands outside of Israel. So he kind of got slapped around for that one. And this is just a little sick, and I'm sorry. I'm really upset about this. Apparently over in New York, there was a man who was arrested trying to get into St. Patrick's Cathedral with 2 cans of gasoline, 2 bottles of lighter fluid, and 2 butane lighters. He was stopped by a security guard, and when the police showed up to talk to him, he said, well, he was going through the cathedral to get to Madison Avenue. His car ran out of gas, but when police checked the man's car, the tank wasn't empty. So come on, people. You know, let's aim for a little more civility here. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Is that man Russian? You know?
It didn't say. They wouldn't release his name until he was charged.
Putin was here, you know?
Yeah.
That's all that seems to rage now, you know? Hey, Mike, not a conspiracy, but about the fire in Notre Dame. Since it's Easter week, was there work going on the church at the time of the fire started?
Yeah, there was a renovation. They had a $6 million renovation going on up on the roof on that spire that went up from the center of the cathedral.
And that was what a scene that was. I mean, very dramatic, that scene. See how images can really make, things. I saw a video before, like this was from a couple of years ago inside. I never been, it's beautiful in there.
Yes.
I mean, really nice, like the stained glass and stuff. But Mike, you know what? I really find it that BBC, CNN, and MSNBC, they all hate the churches and religion. They only believe in neoliberalism, but they all were showing those dramatic images for ratings. But they hate everything the church stands for. All of those people on CNN and BBC,
yep.
They just don't like anything about. And Mike, another thing that really, I'm glad that they raised a lot of money. A lot of money.
Yes.
How come they didn't raise any money for all those churches and Christians in Syria and the people of Syria?
Oh, they don't count.
Because after all, ISIS, didn't they burn a lot of churches down over there and killed Christians through some... I don't know if you heard the story of the Christian family that got thrown down a well.
Yeah, I did hear that one. Okay, Dustin, I got to put you on hold. We've got to take a break for commercials here, and don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And once again, Republic Broadcasting is standing before you with its hand outstretched. And it is really important that everybody listening to this broadcast chip in to keep Republic Broadcasting on the air. because we are, I'm not going to say a lone raft, but we're one of few rafts of the truth floating on an ocean of lies. And if we sink, well, you know what that's going to mean here. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. Excuse me. Excuse me about that. The phone number where you can pledge a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And the network thanks you. Okay, so we're talking with Dustin in New Jersey. We're talking about Notre Dame, and it's amazing. Everybody is now trying to exploit it. I just fielded another story about how, this had to be Islam. They beheaded all of those copper statues of the disciples and the apostles, and obviously that's an homage to Islam, which, no, actually it was just a matter of convenience. But everybody is just pounding on this for whatever political gain they can make.
And like BuzzFeed had that thing, remember that came out and they had all these screen names all in Islam, but I'm like, how do you know those are people that are Muslim? You can make any screen name you want of.
Yep.
You know? So, you can't go by that, you know? Mike, I wanted to switch to the Mueller report.
Well, before we go there, I want to make something clear because I've gotten a lot of emails. Okay. At this point, I tend to think that Notre Dame was just a horrible, tragic accident. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are saying, no, this was done by Macron, it was done by Muslims, it was done by Israel, it was done by this, it was done by that. And that may be the case, but I want to see some real compelling evidence before I make that leap. All right, so on to the Mueller report.
Just to say real quick, not every fire is like done on purpose. You know, we do have real fires and
yes, we do
shootings around. You know, I mean, you just can't say every shooting is or every fire is. So, so with the Mueller report, Mike, like they got these obstruction fake charges. Are they basically using this to hang it over the Trump presidency?
Well,
like to use it. No.
The Mueller report doesn't come on out and actually accuse Trump of obstruction. They've pointed out some areas where it looked like Trump was trying to basically, shall we say, direct the investigation. How the corporate media describes it is that the Mueller report does not exonerate Trump of obstruction, and of course that's going to give the Democrats grist for the mill from now until 2020.
And did you watch that this morning? Like, it's like they blamed, the Russia hacked our. It's just, it's the same script. Russia hacked the election, which is bunk because it doesn't matter who's in power. We got the system we got. Why would they bother hacking if the system is going to be the same? Or
I
absolutely
agree.
You know what I mean?
I absolutely agree.
There's no benefit. What do they get out of it? They don't get anything of doing that. It's just because it's bull. It's bull.
Yes.
It's a lie to demonize Russia. And Mike, but not only that, but like did you see they tried to link Julian Assange now to this whole thing? Which they tried to do, saying he was like a Russian, working with Russia as a what did Mike Pompeo say? A foreign intelligence service.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, hey Mike, did you see he was at Texas A&M and he was saying when he was the head of the CIA, they take courses in lying, cheating, and stealing. But yet, he also said in a previous interview that he always keeps a Bible on his desk when he was at the CIA. And I want to know, to all your listeners, what page in the Bible does it say to be a liar, crook, and stealing stuff, and a murderer?
Well,
Where
it
does
depends
say
on
that?
the particular religion you go to, but a lot of religions say that you can do all that stuff during the week, but then, you go to church on Sunday and all your sins are absolved. And, that's, I think, a dangerous mindset. I think that if you lie, cheat, or steal, and you feel bad about it, that feeling bad about it is nature's way of trying to correct that behavior. But then you go to some church and you throw a few bucks into the collection plate, and the priest says, "You're forgiven, it didn't happen." And then that just makes it easier to go on out and lie, cheat, and steal again. One of the things that really worries me about Mike Pompeo is that he seems to be a dominionist. And these are very, very dangerous people who are absolutely convinced that if they help bring about the end of the world, that Jesus is going to come down and invite them up to the big house. And there are a lot more dominionists than most people realize. Sarah Palin, her church were dominionists.
You are tuned in
Oops,
to the
sorry about
Republic
that.
Broadcasting Network.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm sorry about running over into the commercial break on that last one. I wasn't paying attention to my clock and I didn't hear the music. So I think Dustin is still out there. You still there, Dustin?
Dustin dropped.
Dustin dropped. All right, well, let's switch over to James in California then. James, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. One of the things that I've noticed when I watch those videos about the Hunchback of Notre Dame,
Yes.
they've got scaffolding all around that building.
Yes.
Okay. Do you realize that when you have all that scaffolding, there's a bunch of wood planking on all of that scaffolding?
Yes. Well, sometimes, yes. A lot of scaffolding now uses aluminum decking.
All right. Well, I'm gonna tell you about my part in the construction industry for 40 years, and I'm going to tell you that we used to build scaffolding, and it always had these wood planks.
Yes.
And they were those. They were like what would you call it? Like plywood. They used to use main wood, like a 1x12s. But then they realized that was actually weak, and so they used the composite. Where they would put together the different woods and make them into a more strengthable thing.
Yes.
And well, you got to remember, there's a lot of glue in there.
Yes.
And there was a fire down in San Jose that was actually burned really hard. But when it comes down to it, it's like, so somebody had a torch. That was what they found out in San Jose, was that somebody put a torch down that was still hot. And
Yes.
it slowly heated up whatever it was that they put it down on. And, and I've worked with roofers, and roofers have actually lit roofs on fire by doing the same thing.
Yes.
Put the torch down, and so that's the thing. And then once the scaffolding lights on fire, and if it's got all that wood that's all, laminated wood,
Yes.
it burns hot. It burns really hot, and it could just be a basic ass accident. I was in the construction industry for a lot of years. And yeah, you can make a stupid accident,
Yeah. That's what the Paris authorities are saying. They're saying they're looking at an electrical short circuit that could have set off the wood. But the fire did not appear to start within the scaffolding itself, but actually on the roof at the base of that spire, which is, of course, where the crew was working.
Well, you got to remember, if they're working with the lead glass windows, you know, you the only way you can pull lead glass windows out is by heating up the lead. You know, so you've got people up there with torches that are heating up the lead, trying to pull the windows out.
Well, there are no stained glass windows in the spire. Basically, the lead that's up there at the top of the cathedral is the roofing itself and some sheeting that was on the spire. And by the way, the lead, when you're first making a stained glass window and the lead is, shall we say, fresh and new, you don't need a torch, you just need a hammer. And I know because one of the many things I played around with in my youth was stained glass. And you would get this extruded.
I had a girlfriend of our family that did stained glass.
Yeah. And you need a torch to solder the individual pieces together to make the frame. But actually getting the glass in there, it's basically you slide it into an extruded groove in the lead, and then you just tap the lead until it's snug.
You got to love the artwork of it. Yeah.
Oh,
that is actually one of the most beautiful things. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I just was wanting to bring that up because nobody's mentioning that when you see the fire, that there's all that scaffolding around the building itself.
Yes.
And the scaffolding is burning really hard.
Well, then you're correct that there was a lot of wood that was being used as the decking there, and you know, better the decking on the scaffolding than the cathedral itself would be my response to that.
Well, it's just the nature of scaffolding. I mean, you know, you've got to have all those wood planks for people to walk around on.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things. I just wonder why nobody mentions all the scaffolding that's around that building at that time.
Well, again, it was known that there was a renovation going on. It was a $6 million renovation of that central spire.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay.
And yet nobody mentions the scaffolding.
All right.
And believe me, man, you get a bunch of scaffolding wood on fire, and it burns because it's got chemicals in it for all the lamination, and it burns really hot. I mean, I've been in the construction industry, Mike. I know how it happens, you know. So, I mean, and then again, I mean, it's, you know, the old wood that's in that stuff, yeah. You know, you got, you know, what is it, like 600 years? I forget how old that church is.
800.
You know? But 800 years. I mean, yeah, so some of that wood is like just, you know, it's like lighting a match, you know, and it burns. It just burns, you know. So, I mean, and I've seen some other fires in the construction industry where somebody put down a torch that was still hot, and they put it down, and they put it down in an area, and it, you know, like roofing industry where people would put down the torch and then go to lunch, and then they come back an hour later and the roof's on fire.
Yeah.
You know, and it's because of the stupid torch, you know. You know, you gotta take that into consideration, that sometimes there's just construction accidents, man.
Well, that seems to be where the Paris authorities are focusing, that it was simply an accident, you know, caused by the crew that was doing the renovation.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And once it lights up, I mean, once it lights up, it's like, what are you going to do?
Okay, well, you know, again, yeah, I mean, when you're dealing with the cathedral, when you're dealing with a tall building and there's no interior access, that's the reason the fire really got going. They knew there was a fire up in the timbers above the ceiling of the cathedral, but there was just no real way to get up there to deal with it. Anyway, James, thanks an awful lot for the phone call.
All right, brother. No, I just wanted to put in my 2 cents on that because I've been there. I've been through the construction industry, And you have accidents that just happen.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Bill in Wisconsin. Aloha, Bill. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, I realize you're not religious.
True.
But you made a statement here a short time ago that a number of Christian people do whatever they want throughout the week. They lie, they maybe steal whatever, and then they throw a few dollars in the collection basket, and the priest will forgive them
Yes.
of their offenses.
Yes.
And that's not quite accurate as to what transpires. Okay, if an individual would go to a Catholic confessor, okay, and
Yes.
say that they're sorry for committing whatever sin is a transgression against God, okay, and they're not sorry, and they're going to do the same thing again, and they state that, well, I'm going to do the same thing, their sin will not be forgiven. Now, if they don't say that, then God knows, and God is not mocked, okay? Consequently, they might think their sin is forgiven, but it's not forgiven, okay? And they are in a worse state spiritually than they were before. And then anyone, and I'm a traditional Catholic, anyone that goes to a confessor, okay, does not have to throw anything at any time in the collection basket, and especially for the idea of forgiveness of sin. So that's one comment, and if you want to, rejoin something else back, feel free to do so.
Well, I think probably everybody has their own interpretation of how the mechanism is actually working. I remember when I was walking around the Wall Street area in New York City, there was this rather amazing church there. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but apparently churches are big business in Wall Street.
Well, there might have been a church in that neighborhood, but whether or not it's connected to Wall Street, I don't know. But one other comment, and this has to do with the Mueller report. I think what transpired, what I listened to the entire thing today, and, Trump was exonerated of all collusion, but Barr made comments several times, and he said anyone else besides Trump, his campaign, so on and so forth, but anyone else. So I'm waiting for Trump here to put on his big boy pants and now begin to go after Hillary and all of her erased emails and all the corrupt cops there in the FBI and so forth. If that doesn't happen, then I'll say, and go back to my original comment, when the Mueller report was first reported, that perhaps he's made peace with the deep state. Another example might be that he vetoed, the situation of getting out of, the situation there. Oh, what is that country there? Kids.
Yemen?
Okay, anyway, he vetoed that, which means Saudi Arabia's Yemen. Sorry, senior moment. Okay, so Yemen is going to continue. Now,
Yes.
why is he going to do that unless he's totally bought into the deep state and Bolton and everything that they're doing militarily.
Well, Trump
So
seems
that's
to
all
have
I have
basically delegated our foreign policy to John Bolton and Mike Pompeo. And Pompeo and Bolton are just, running around the globe dropping bombs on people who have not attacked us.
Right. And of course, they're all for Israel. So Israel's controlling our foreign policy, controlling Trump, and, it's a sad situation. But in any case, Michael, I know you're not religious, but I do say prayers for you because, as our Lord said as he hung on the cross, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Thank you for your listening today.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your thoughts and your and for your prayer. And we're going to let you go here and get on back to the news. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So apparently, over in Iraq, an Iraq court has sentenced to death the Belgian citizen Bilal Abdul Aziz al-Marsushi, also known as Abu Fadil el-Belghigi, for his membership in ISIS. Now, he was born in Belgium. He has Belgian nationality. And apparently he was accused of many things, including setting up a pornographic website. And apparently with that money received military training from the al-Nusra Front and then left to join ISIS. From then on, he was a successful member of the military police, the criminal police, and the moral police of ISIS in the occupied part of Aleppo, and finally joined the general administration of ISIS in the Syrian city of Raqqa, then considered the capital of the caliphate. Here is the interesting thing. According to this guy, he's confirmed ISIS used chlorine gas against civilians in Syria with the intention of framing Bashar al-Assad. So more confirmation of what we already knew. Okay, Russia has put together this forum of Russian-Arab cooperation, and they have agreed to continue developing efforts to contribute to normalization of life in Libya after it got, messed with by the United States of America. And this was declared by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, at the closing of negotiations held with the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Ahmed Abul Gheit. They've said, we've agreed to continue working on the normalization of Libya. So once again, Russia is trying to stabilize things, calm everything down, while the U.S. makes war. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Okay, and welcome back to our show here. And over in Israel, it looks like Netanyahu, now that he's won or stole re-election, he's working on a little political deal to try and get himself out of his legal troubles. And he's now dangling the possibility of annexation of the West Bank in front of members of the government, and in return, they will back immunity legislation. They will pass a law saying, no, you can't go after Netanyahu, no matter how much corruption he has done, because he is our savior and he's given us the West Bank, blah, 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 blah. So that's the way that things work over there in Israel. All right, let's talk about Donald Trump, and let's talk about the war agenda, because Trump is surrounded by neocon war hawks, many of whom date back to the administration of George W. Bush, the guy who said the Constitution is a blankety-blank piece of paper. And they've supported these regime change wars in Libya, Iraq, and Syria. And now they're calling for the overthrow of the governments of Venezuela and Iran. And of course, they've been lusting after Iran for a very, very long time. Before we go much further, though, I do want to point out that we really did not do that well in Iraq. The people and government of Iraq are anxious for the United States to leave. We certainly did not do very well in Syria. We didn't do well in Afghanistan. And now, of course, you've got Russia working with Libya to try and sort things out over there. So the war agenda isn't going very well. I mean, it makes for great TV, makes for great TV news. Oh, look, hey, you know, we're bombing things again because we're good at it, as George Carlin would used to say. But it's not proceeding very well. It's certainly not on schedule. When General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this whole agenda, it was supposed to be over by 2008. And here we are, 2019, 11 years after it was supposed to be over, and we're still mired in the swamps all over the globe. Okay, Lawrence Wilkerson, who once served as chief of staff for former Secretary of State Colin Powell, is commenting in an interview with the Real News Network that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is clearly setting the stage for a war with Iran. And Wilkerson is saying he sees the same pattern that developed ahead of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. He said the same characters with a few new additions are laying that trail down. It's the same people playing the same game. What are they going to say that Iran is guilty of? Why we have to invade? We already know they don't actually have nuclear weapons. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back with hour number 2. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And speaking of Israel, they finally found another Nazi that they can parade before the world. They've got this guy who used to basically stand up in the watchtower. That was his job. And he's 92 years old. He's a former concentration camp guard. And the German prosecutors have gone after him. They have charged him as an accessory to thousands of murders during the 9 months he spent on duty at a concentration camp watchtower at the end of World War II. And so Israel's got another Nazi they can wag at us while they go on committing atrocities against the Palestinian people. It's just, what is Israel going to do when they finally get the last Nazi? I mean, this guy's 92. He may not even live until he's actually taken to trial. I think that happened like either the last Nazi or the one before that. They said, we've got a Nazi, let's have a show trial. Plop. Oh, well, never mind. It's time to let it go. It is time to let history be history. And if you look at some of the people they've tried, I mean, the guy who fed the dogs, a bookkeeper, the guy who just did, and they say, oh, you're all in there, you're accessories to the Holocaust. No, it was a guy who fed the dogs and somebody who did the bookkeeping. So anyway, over in China, the Chinese People's Liberation Army, Navy, has unveiled a tactical laser system that seems very similar to the one tested by the U.S. Navy back in 2014. And this is a laser that is designed, well, zero time of flight, to be able to basically knock down incoming drones or cruise missiles before they can strike the ship. And the development of the laser weaponry is meant to deal with maneuverable weapons, weapons that are maneuverable in the terminal phase, where it can't be predicted where they're going to be by the time a solid munition gets there. So with the laser weapons, if you just get the sight on the target and you hit the button is hit with a laser beam. Real Star Wars stuff here. Okay, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will hold a meeting in Russia before the end of the month. And apparently this was Putin's idea. He's invited Kim to visit with Russia. And I think Putin realized that the two summits with Donald Trump basically represented a failure and left an influence vacuum on the peninsula to which Russia is about to step in. So if anybody from the White House is listening to this radio show, I got to tell you, Pompeo and Bolton, they may be starting all these wars that we really can't afford. But in terms of actual foreign policy, they're blowing it. They're absolutely blowing it. I mean, unless their goal is to simply alienate the rest of the world against the United States, in which case they're doing a bang-up job. What can I tell you? All right, over at Rand Corporation, which is this well-known think tank used by the government, they have had a contract sponsored by the Pentagon to basically simulate World War III. And this article, which is in the Truth Seeker over in Great Britain, says that the Rand Corporation has come on back saying that in scenarios against Russia and China, the U.S. does not do very well. In fact, it was described as getting its rear end handed to it in these World War III simulations. So Rand analysts have revealed that in scenario after scenario after scenario, the United States suffered severe losses despite spending nearly $1 trillion annually on the military, exceeding the spending of any other country by more than double. Actually, the United States spends more on its military than the next 25 nations combined, 24 of whom are supposedly our allies. So researcher David Ochmanek said, in our games, when we fight Russia and China, the U.S. gets its rear end handed to it. He mentioned this at a speech at the Center for the New American Security basically a week ago. Said we lose a lot of people, we lose a lot of equipment, we usually fail to achieve our objective of preventing aggression by the adversary. Well, there's a big flaw in your simulations right there, because it's the United States who's the aggressor. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to go back to the phones to John in Tennessee. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Now, you said it many times, and you said it again today. This Mueller thing is never going away. And what I'm envisioning right now is like one of those Ben Garrison cartoons with just some big fat slob of like a Zionist or whatever figure, just pounding a spike into the American flag or something, and on the spike it says Mueller report.
Yep.
This whole thing had to be a 2-year-long concocted whatever it is, just because this morning when the thing came out, I was in front of the TV at 9:30 for like 15 minutes. I was curious. I wanted to see. But then I checked like Twitter, and I just thumbed through some social media, hashtag Mueller report. Let me use the word rancor, right?
Yes.
Or the vitriolic rhetoric.
Yep.
Both sides, Republican versus Democrat, Trump, not my president, whatever. This whole thing was meant to divide the country. The whole thing was a scheme. And the corporate media is just playing us. And people are, we're such a dumbed-down electorate now that people are appealing to authority, and that authority is like the corporate media just to formulate an opinion. Obviously you say golden things on your show, and then we go repeat them to somebody, and then if that opens a conversation about Ron Paul, the Fed, 9/11, whatever it is, we kind of end up doing a patriotic dump on somebody because we're concerned about getting the constitutional republic back or whatever. But, and then people recoil. You're getting too deep. It's like Dustin always said, we're just completely out of time. I don't want to hear about Trump in 2020 or, the Mueller report just sealed it up for Trump or any of that stuff, because for the next 2 years, what we're going to hear is what we're hearing already, is that Trump tried to stop the Mueller report on 10 occasions. It's an impeachable offense. So this country's going to keep fighting with each other, and they're going to do it at the water cooler at work. You're going to do it with your neighbors in your front yard when you're cutting the grass, trimming the bushes. People have come down on one side or the other, and because it's been 2 years filling up their minds, they're just not open to any other opinion. They've already chosen a side,
Yep.
and they'll fight with anybody about.
Hello, John?
Yeah, I'm here. I mean, is that a pretty good analysis? Just this whole thing was concocted just to divide us.
I
There's a
don't
lot
think
of
it was
wasted money
concocted
on those
to divide us. I think it's being played up by the corporate media who are desperate to get their audience back. And I mean, you know, if you look at this whole week, they were hyping up this release of the Mueller report like it was some key historical event. And now, of course, they're trying to keep that momentum going. But the reality is there's nothing new in there that we didn't already know. It exonerates Trump of collusion with Russia. According to William Barr, it does not exactly exonerate Trump of obstruction with the investigation. But on the other hand, we work under a system where you've got to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt of a crime before you can move forward, certainly not with impeachment. And of course, they're not exactly exonerating Russia of interference in the election as well. But again, Julian Assange could pull the rug out from under that entire Mueller report by saying, no, the DNC emails were not hacked by Russia, it was an internal leak. And we're already seeing where the Mueller report is already undermining a lot of the other propaganda that has been thrown at us, like the Steele report. It undermined that.
Okay. Well, and I really do like that angle that you put out there. You know, if Trump were to pardon Assange, he could just destroy the Democrat Party immediately. And again, if the money to Ecuador was a bribe just to get Assange, so Trump could do something like that, go, here's my ace card. Like they're all playing a game against each other, like the Hillarys and the Trumps don't get along, or the deep state or the Bushes and the Clintons and Obama. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I almost don't want to believe it because I want to say Trump was a casino mogul. He was, quote unquote, part of the 1% or whatever. He hobnobbed, gave politicians money just so he could get his buildings done. He knows how things work, but is he really this super patriot everybody wants to believe he is?
Well, at this point, I'm going to say no. And one thing he's demonstrated over the last 2 years is that he is a user of people, and we probably should have spotted that with his reality TV show, The Apprentice, where he'll use up people and then discard them when they're no longer useful. Because all of the people who worked to support Trump or oppose Hillary Clinton in 2016, Trump has just dropped the ball on them. All the promises he made about finding out why medical costs are so high, about looking at vaccine safety, about restoring integrity to our election system, he just dropped the ball on all of those. He's basically turned his back on the independent media with all this corporate censorship that's going on. And I don't know who he thinks is going to be working for him in 2020 because money alone is not going to do it.
No, and obviously he's doing everything Netanyahu or Israel wants.
Yes.
So, you know, if he does try to start something with Iran, which is completely, absolutely baseless, I mean, we all say we've all had it, but you wonder, you know, when Obama went into Syria, the Democrats didn't say boo, you know?
Yes.
So they were supposed to be. Yeah, no, we're going to keep watching it. I guess that's the comment you made about Assange getting pardoned and saying Seth Rich was the leak or whatever, it was an internal leak from that point has got to be made to Tucker Carlson, and he's got to say that on his show. He really does.
Okay.
I mean, if that was a cash run to Ecuador to do that, I mean, the games these people play at that level, holy crap, are we in we're in a lot of trouble.
Yes, we are.
So, all right. Well, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open now. So we're talking about the Mueller report. After all the Sturm und Drang, the redacted version is out. And I took a quick flip through it myself. There's not many redactions, but there are a few. And according to Attorney General William Barr, the Mueller report confirms there was no collusion by the Trump campaign with Russia in the 2016 campaign. And Barr announced the redacted version of the Mueller report was delivered to Congress at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And of course, it's now available to the public. And he repeated his comments from the March 24th letter. There was no evidence of conspiracy by the Trump campaign in the 2016 election, and noted that Mueller did not make a conclusion on possible obstruction by Trump. Now, the Democrats are going to say, well, you know, if he didn't rule it out, then we have to look for that. And of course, we have all these Democratic politicians. They're launching their own investigations. We want to see all of the evidence here. And of course, Trump is understandably angry at this effort to undermine his presidency, which has been going on for 2 years. On the other hand, Trump was out there tweeting, I'm having a good day. He's trolling the Democrats, saying that, you know, he's completely exonerated. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Fred from Northern Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Yeah, I wanted to comment on what Barr said during his press conference there. I guess, number one, he was talking really highly of Robert Mueller.
Yes.
And Rosenstein, when you and I both know that they're both as crooked as, I mean, you're going to have to screw them in the ground when they die. But, you know, he left out a lot of things, too. He had talked about the Russians that were indicted for supposedly meddling in our elections. And if I remember correctly, I think there was 22 Russians that he indicted. And what they did is, I don't know if they came personally to the court trial, but they sent their lawyers and what have you. And Robert Mueller never showed up. They were going to contest what he was charging them with. And it just kind of went in the back burner. He goes, oh, I don't want to mess with this, because the charges were probably phony. But yeah, nobody ever talks about, you know, the Russians that came and said, okay, you're making all these indictments about me, and now let's straighten it out. But then he never showed up. Mm-hmm. You've heard that before?
Yeah, I'd heard that.
So I'm kind of thinking, I don't know about Barr, and I know he's pretty good friends, from what I understand, with Mueller, who is, again, so damn crooked. And I mean, putting people with Whitey, you know, putting innocent people in jail for, you know, a long time. So I just don't know about him. I don't know if we're ever going to get Hillary indicted, or, you know, Comey or Brennan, or all these people who is conspired in this conspiracy to, you know, the coup for, you know, getting rid of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I'm kind of wondering, why is Donald Trump not doing something? I mean, if you go back and you study history and you look at failed attempts at coups d'etats or assassinations, there's a huge, huge backlash. And one example, of course, would be the failed attempt to assassinate the King of Portugal. This was back in the 1700s. And I forget exactly what it was, except that my ancestors got caught in the backlash, even though there's no indication they had anything to do with the assassination attempt. And that's when they left Portugal and went to the to Shanghai. So, you know, where's the backlash that we should be seeing from this failed coup d'etat? You know, a Twitter storm? I'm sorry, that's really not enough.
And I'm thinking that I think that the president is over the Justice Department, and I think that he is the one who would direct the Attorney General to, I want this and that, and he would have to, concede to do what the president says. So, I'm not quite certain about that either. It's like if Trump, is egotistical and whatever he is, he has the right to do it, to direct the Attorney General to do or to stop investigations. That's been protocol for as long as I know. So if they're not investigating Hillary, if they're not going after Conan or Brennan, or I just don't understand why the president just isn't acting his authority to go over these people. So can you explain why?
I'm in agreement. I'm absolutely in agreement. And, of course, we don't know what private discussions are taking place between President Trump and Attorney General Barr. It could be simply that William Barr is continuing in a long line of corrupt, bought and paid for attorney generals who are not going to prosecute the deep state. But it would be nice to see something happening. Anyway, listen, Fred, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the phones to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. Call me crazy or whatever, but I'd like to know what is so aggressive about the American flag. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry, what is so aggressive about the American flag?
Yeah, I'm sure you know what news story I'm talking about.
Actually, would you enlighten me?
Okay. I'm back to my my email here because I had to actually create something that I could refer back to. Laguna Beach, police cars, their new police cars and the new paint job done where the word police, big, giant, bold letters on a white background down the side of the vehicle, and the words police are spelled out. So it looks like if you took a big, giant chunk of poster board or something and you cut the stencils police out, you cut the words out police, and then you put that over top of an American flag, and oh boy, there was so many people just got all twisted and bent out of shape, got their panties in a wad, talking about how aggressive that was and how they felt so intimidated.
Well, I saw the story. I didn't see the comment about aggressive, but I agree. It's an inappropriate use of the symbol, and it does bother me. I mean, there are very strict rules on flag etiquette. And I even had to chastise one of the people at Claire's church who on Veterans Day wears this shirt with the American flag on it. And if you actually read the flag etiquette, that is considered a tacky no-no. So,
well, I agree. There is flag etiquette, and you're not supposed to use the pattern of the American flag for anything other than the flag itself.
Yes.
Or like a big painting of the flag or something with the flag intact. You're not supposed to have shirts and diapers and baby blankets and hats and all. You're not supposed to have any of that.
Yes.
But in the article, it literally says the City Council of Laguna Beach, California is reconsidering the design recently implemented on its new police vehicles, a prominent American flag graphic, after some community members expressed shock and concern at the aggressive logo. That was the story. And the whole thing is they're talking about they're intimidated by the American flag itself. This is what they're intimidated by, the flag. So anything that has the American flag, they feel intimidated, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. What is so intimidating about the American flag? I personally am offended that they would use one of our great symbols.
Yeah. In
this way. I'm offended by that, but I don't see it as aggressive. I just see it as offensive.
Well,
but then again,
let me take the opposite position here. There are people right now who are not fans of the United States. They may be concerned. Well, let's take a look at perhaps illegal immigrants who would see the American flag as possibly a symbol of aggression to get them deported. I go out of my way to not use the U.S. flag postage stamps on my mail. I'll get something else like the popsicles or Easter or fluffy, little kitten stamps. I don't want to use the American flag stamps. And that's just my little way of expressing the fact that I'm very unhappy with the current U.S. government. Does not mean I would disrespect the flag itself. I just prefer not to have to look at it right now.
I fly the flag proudly, but I fly it upside down because of what the the inversion of the flag represents in distress. That's what that means. When you flip the flag and you fly it upside down, that means in distress. So I fly the flag, but I fly it inverted because our nation is in distress.
Okay,
People
Art.
get offended by that.
Art, I don't know what the laws are where you live, but if you fly the flag inverted and you are not actually in distress, you can get into trouble out here in Hawaii.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good thing I don't live in Hawaii, huh?
But you might want to check your local laws here, because basically it amounts to like filing a false police report or sending in a false fire alarm.
Well, I guess I can see where you're coming from, but when I explain to people why I do that, they kind of, oh, okay, I get it, yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't feel offended by that whatsoever. Once I explain to them why I do it, they see no offense in it at all. They're kind of like, yeah, okay, I get that. Yeah, you're right. And so nobody seems to have a problem. But illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, they should be intimidated by the flag.
Oh, I agree.
Because they're illegal.
I agree.
But anyway, I'm just actually, a little shocked that Americans would find the flag aggressive or offensive in any way. I just find that kind of shocking.
Okay, well, Art, Art, we're going to have to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And out of the corner of my eye, I've been watching the Fox News feed. And for some reason, they've been doing this story about Heath Ledger, who was this Australian actor. And he was best known for playing the Joker in The Dark Knight, and then passing away shortly thereafter from what we are told was an accidental overdose of prescription medication. And so, yeah, they're back to them. I don't know why they're doing a story about him now, but apparently this is Fox News' idea of keeping us up to date. Okay, getting on back to the Mueller report, the Department of Justice is planning to allow certain selected lawmakers to view the Mueller report without certain redactions. In other words, certain privileged individuals are going to be allowed to take a peek underneath the black and see what is there. Which, I don't know. If you're going to let it out, let it out. So if what is underneath those redactions is actionable, at some point it's going to become public. Anyway, Attorney General Barr is getting a little bit of a ribbing because he's released the Mueller report on CD-ROM, which, as you know, is basically now considered an obsolete medium. And so the social media is out there saying, what year is it? And they're giving him a good ribbing here. All right. Now, Representative Nadler is a little upset that the White House was briefed on the Mueller report before its formal release. Now, that's not what he said back in 1998. When America was waiting for Ken Starr's report on Clinton's sex scandals to be released, Nadler took to the House floor to decry the fact that Clinton was not able to see the report before it was publicly released so he could prepare a response. So once again, we're seeing this little bit of hypocrisy here. You know, how dare President Trump be given an advance look, and how dare Bill Clinton not be given an advance look? Well, Bill Clinton was able to prepare a response because he did it. He had sex with Monica Lewinsky, and that's, all he needed to base his response on. And he did come on out and say, yes, I did have sex with her. I did misstate that. Okay, so story that's coming on out here from Daily Caller. Christopher Steele, the former MI6 spy who came up with this dossier, he's refusing to meet with the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. And the DOJ IG is scrutinizing the dossier and apparently is poised to cast doubt on the veracity of some of the claims made in this dossier. Well, yeah. So, Donald Trump was out there tweeting again about the fact that the FBI made 11 payments to Christopher Steele. And Christopher Steele was never shy about the fact he's a Trump hater. He's a never Trumper. He was ideal for recruitment by the Democratic National Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign. They gave him a bunch of money laundered through Fusion GPS and said, sick him! All right, it is getting to be a crowded field for the Democratic nomination going into 2020. And I'm looking at this article that came out of Investment Watch blog, and it's talking about how establishment Democrats are already plotting to take Bernie Sanders down. They want him out of the race, and the reason they do is because right now he is polling very well. They think he could win the nomination and then lose the election. They want Bernie Sanders out because they're convinced Trump will beat him in 2020. And yeah, I can see their concern. Here is the problem. The Democrats don't have anybody less likely to be defeated by Trump than Bernie Sanders. I mean, even with all the things that Trump is doing wrong, even with his abandoning his base, he's going into 2020, with a great deal of strength. The Democrats could win the election. They could win the White House if they had a credible candidate, and so far they don't. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard is looking good. She's never going to be allowed to get to the nomination. The military-industrial complex absolutely hates her anti-war status. I dread Hillary Clinton stepping on back in, but I don't think she's going to do all that well. I think everybody's dealing with Hillary burnout. There's a lot of people, even within the Democratic Party, just wish she would shut up and go away. We're tired of hearing her. So the Democrats really don't have anybody that they can put up against Trump. Trump may win 2020 more by default than anything else, not because he deserves it and is running a great campaign. It's just the Democrats don't have anybody who's credible, except Tulsi Gabbard, and again, they won't run her. Because the bomb people wouldn't like it. They would be so upset if there was an anti-war president. All the money would go away. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is out there pounding the impeach Trump drum. And I don't know who her handlers are and who her financial backers are. I mean, this is a woman who went from a couple of evictions and a lousy credit report to being in charge of one of the financial committees in the House of Representatives. I mean, talk about being manufactured. And every time she opens her mouth, she just makes things look worse and worse. And I mean, as soon as she got elected, she was the darling of the Democrats. She's going to be the future president. She's going to be this. She's an idiot. I'm sorry. She's an idiot. So she's out there talking about impeaching Donald Trump. And apparently the phrase high crimes and misdemeanors has too many syllables for Alexandria to comprehend. And she was being interviewed on Yahoo News Skullduggery whether she supports impeaching President Trump. And she came on out there and said, yes, she does. Yes, she does. And she says you could reach into a bag and pull so many things out that are impeachable on the president. And that's when the interviewers asked her to cite 3 specific things. And that's when she got into trouble, because she came on out starting with emoluments. And it makes a nice buzzword. But unfortunately, the U.S. General Services Administration already put a damper on those claims. And that's when Alexandria had to start struggling and came on out claiming that Donald Trump's tax cuts and the impending census were grounds for impeachment. And that's completely nonsense. That's if they want Alexandria to continue her political career, they got to put a gag on her, because every time she opens her mouth, she just demonstrates she does not have a clue about how government works. She doesn't have a clue about the Constitution. She's a pretty face and a politically correct name. Okay, rising Democratic star Pete Buttigieg, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, apparently is already enlisting Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton fundraisers to start building his 2020 campaign war chest. And the financiers on the roster range from former U.S. ambassadors to real estate executives. The latest evidence that the South Bend, Indiana mayor's underdog bid to challenge President Trump next year is catching on with Democrats as the party sorts through this very crowded primary field. Okay. It's about time to start seeing the first of the dropouts, I think. I keep hearing that Beto O'Rourke's campaign may be fizzling. Now, amazingly enough, all over at the Washington Compost, they've written an editorial column that admits Fox News was right all along, and they're comparing the anti-Trump fake news bias in corporate media. They're saying it is worthy of investigation, that there should be an investigation about all of the anti-Trump bias in the corporate media. I remember when there was this big stink over this TV game show. It was a game show, the $64,000 question. And it came on out that the game show was rigged, that they were taking contestants that the audience really liked, and they were giving them the answers ahead of time. And that resulted in a congressional investigation for a game show. Big stink. Absolutely huge, huge stink. Well, we have another situation here. Because, I mean, after all, how is your life affected by a game show? It isn't really. But when you have the corporate media that is lying to you, yeah, I think there ought to be a congressional investigation. I think the heads of those news departments ought to just be, run over the coals. Said, what the heck are you doing? All right, let's talk about the economic news now. Apparently, 2/3 of American CFOs are predicting we will hit a recession in the summer of next year. So I disagree. I think we're seeing the signs of it starting now. But the CFOs are saying it'll be on for real in summer of 2020. 1/5 of the global investment grade bond market is now in negative yield territory. Too much of our economy is being based on, borrowing and investment. And the interest is just eating up the liquidity. I remember when I was a kid, everybody wanted to have a good credit rating, but, you didn't actually use the credit card until you really needed it. You paid cash or you did without. Because when those interest payments started compounding, that's when people got into trouble. That's when people have gotten into trouble. There's a major credit problem with the American people right now. And if they're going to be riding that into this next recession, over at Retail Mageddon, apparently Pier 1 Imports is getting ready to close another 145 stores in another attempt to stall their steep decline. And I know they've already closed the Pier 1 that was near our home over that away. And I think I know where Pier 1 went wrong, because I remember when Pier 1 first opened, and they had lots of exciting, intriguing things from around the world, decorator items, and it really catered to the exotic, and that was its charm. Hence the name, Pier 1 Imports. You're seeing all these things from other parts of the world. And maybe it's just that our entire world has become homogenized. But I remember the last time we went into this Pier 1 before it closed, walking around, it looked like a Sears. There was nothing there that really stood out as being unique or being from another part of the world. And I think that's where they went wrong. Speaking of Sears, apparently Sears Holding Corporation is now suing their longtime former chairman, Eddie Lampert, his hedge fund, ESL Investments, and others like Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, claiming they illegally siphoned billions of dollars of assets from the retailer before it went bankrupt. So Sears is claiming Lampert looted the company and drove it into bankruptcy. A little bit of nastiness there. Out in California, where they're dealing with tons of illegal immigrants who are costing the state lots of money, and they're trying to figure out new things to tax, and they're taxing everything out there, and the latest one is drinking water. They're going to tax drinking water. This is the latest tax the poor effort to slow the financial hemorrhaging of the left-wing bureaucracy, which loves the illegal immigrants, and it doesn't matter how much they cost us here. We'll just tax the legal citizens a little bit more to pay for it all, because we know those illegal immigrants are all going to be voting Democrat in 2020, and that makes it all hunky-dory. Now, over at Chase Bank, they're still dealing with the backlash of debanking Trump supporters. And now they're trying to take the high ground, saying that the reason they can't do business with, quote, those types of people, end quote, is moral character. Chase Bank thinks that Trump supporters, people who wear MAGA hats, lack the moral character to do business with Chase Bank. Remembering, of course, that Chase Bank itself is one of the 6 banks listed in this recent report from financial regulators as being engaged in a continuing series of financial shenanigans. But the Trump backers lack moral character. Frankly, if you're with Chase Bank, I'd suggest getting on out. They don't want to do business with you. You're not their moral kind of people. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about immigration. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we have been talking about the situation at our southern border for a long time now. So has President Trump. And despite all the talk, the situation hasn't really changed. The illegal immigrants are still pouring across that border. There aren't enough facilities to hold the ones who are seeking asylum. So they're basically given a court date to show up, and they're just let go into the United States of America. Just walk across the border. No other country on earth has an immigration policy that says, yeah, you can walk on in and we'll worry about the paperwork later. You go down to that southern border and you walk the other way. You walk into Mexico without permission, you are going to jail. If you want to be fair, let's have an immigration policy just like Mexico's. That would solve a lot of problems. Apparently over in Yuma, Arizona, the mayor there has declared a state of emergency on the U.S. border. It is just that out of control. There are that many people who are coming on in. Now, according to this story in Newsweek, Donald Trump has ordered thousands more troops to the Mexican border. And this is going to be over the next 2 months. Officials in U.S. Army North, the unit overseeing the border mission, drafted the deployment orders in anticipation of a new request from Homeland Security to aid U.S. Customs and Border Protection in the ongoing Joint Agency Border Mission. Well, I hope this time they take some of those area denial weapons with them, you know, like the LRAD, the loud sound thing, or the microwave. They got to do something. It's completely out of control. And I'm sorry, this is another area in which Donald Trump has completely dropped the ball. He campaigned on this issue. And it was one of the issues that put him over the top. Because even back in 2016, most Americans understood the illegal immigrants were a problem in this country. And, you know, great, they're sending more troops down. But for the human smugglers, just means they have to drive a little further down that road along the border. And it means the illegal immigrants have to walk back a little further after they cross over. Now, there's a big stink over Donald Trump's announcement that he's going to start busing the illegal immigrants to the sanctuary cities, sanctuary counties, sanctuary states. And apparently up in New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio vows that he will sue Donald Trump if Trump sends illegal immigrants to a sanctuary city. Well, why did you call it a sanctuary city if you don't want the illegal immigrants? All right, we got to take a break here for station identification. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about the fact it's still a problem, and nothing is getting done. Everything that we see happening is a token gesture. It's symbolic. You know, we get a symbol here, you know, for the simple-minded, as Carlin would say. But nothing concrete is being done. Still no wall. Still wrangling over that. The Democrats are flooding this country with illegal immigrants. They're going to get them to vote Democratic to basically get a lock on power in this country. Why Trump doesn't understand that this is what's going on. He's got basically less than 2 years until the election. In fact, if you count the primaries, he's got to take action now. He's got to start going into those states with early primaries and basically cleaning them out. You don't have citizenship. You're on a bus headed for the border. We're going to fling you back on over. Go back to where you came from. You don't belong here. And by the way, it's legal. Trump has every authority to send the migrants to the sanctuary cities. Bill de Blasio can threaten to sue all he wants. He doesn't have grounds for a lawsuit. He's the one who declared, this is a sanctuary city. We're not going to enforce immigration law here. Okay, fine. You get the illegal immigrants. You get to deal with the mess. Apparently, Arizona Republican Representative Andy Biggs led a border tour on Tuesday alongside 4 other GOP congressmen. And apparently, they were down there to inspect smuggling activity taking place in the area, and apparently missed 3 women and 1 child who basically walked across the border behind them. Well, there's leadership for you. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Jim in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'd like to remind everyone that in the 1965 Immigration Act, 77% of Democrats voted for it. You know how many Republicans?
Nope.
85%. Remember, the Republican Party, at least the country club type Republicans, they love cheap labor. And unfortunately, I think the Republican establishment to this day loves cheap labor.
Well, all businessmen love cheap labor, but the problem is that government is supposed to find a balance between the interests of corporate America and the needs of the general population. And right now, the general population has about 100 million people who have not been able to find work for months and years. And we've got to get them back to work. And just flooding the illegal immigrants in, and even worse, giving them work permits. What a stupid thing that is. It's a hammer blow to our already fragile economy. And it's very misguided, and I just don't understand why, again, Trump is dropping the ball on this.
Yes. Well, the Democrats used to be the party of the working people.
Yeah.
Used to be.
Well, that was the claim.
Would, 50 years ago. But I was going to call yesterday. Joe in Tennessee made a very interesting call about the Notre Dame fire.
Yeah.
Claimed that it was an occult ritual by the Illuminati or elite in France. And I found that very interesting because what's going on with the yellow vests and Macron's problems that he's having.
Yes.
What a perfect false flag to unite the French people and put to rest this silly yellow vest protest. Very, very possible.
Well, there are other places that Macron could have used. For example, like the Eiffel Tower, which would be a lot easier, cheaper to repair. There's no question that, like any politician, Macron is taking advantage of the situation. But again, whether he actually caused it, I'm not willing to take that step over there. And one of the reasons is because we didn't see Macron immediately prepared to exploit the emotional tragedy. Normally when you see one of these false flags, the mechanisms are already in place. Everything is set to go. The instant the event happens, you get a flood of stuff going into the corporate media to say, oh, this is horrible, and here's who we're going to blame. And we didn't see that this time. I'm tending to side with the French authorities. This was a tragic accident involving some of the equipment that was up on the roof as part of the renovation. I'm in agreement with that caller that we had call in earlier, saying that all it takes is for somebody to put down a torch that hasn't cooled properly and just leave it there, and it can start a fire.
Yes, of course. That's possible. Well, I read that for a full arson investigation, it takes a month. They have to put samples to the lab.
Yep.
It's like a month to really get to the bottom of what happened. But I'm a little suspicious, but we hopefully we'll find out. Hey, I had a question. Does Iran have the S-300 or S-400 systems?
I have to be very honest. I'm not sure. I don't think they have the S-400, but they may have the S-300. They're getting all cozy with Russia these days.
Well, I hope so. I think the S-400 is great. I think every sovereign country should have the S-400 in case, like Iran and Venezuela, in case some country out there, who could that be, decided to attack them. I mean,
Okay. I just did a quick check. I did a quick check. Iran has both the S-300 and the S-400.
Oh, great. That's great news. In case some belligerent country out there, and I wonder who that could be, decided to, it's a deterrent, it's a purely defensive weapon. And, if I was Putin, I would be selling S-400s to Syria, Iran, and Venezuela.
Yes.
And, of course, the U.S., they could just maybe not attack anyone, and that would solve the problem.
Well, that would solve a lot of problems, but unfortunately, as long as Mike Pompeo and John Bolton are directing our foreign policy, it's going to be more war and more war and more war, because that's their solution for everything. It's like the law of the hammer, which, if you give a small child a hammer, everything they encounter requires pounding. When you hand Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, the ability to make war, everybody they encounter needs invading.
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine said like a year ago that there will not be a war with Iran. I hope he's right. And I was reading an interesting article. I don't know the website. I bounce around on the internet. This Iran tension, it's a, quote, Cold War. It's like a Cold War to increase weapons sales, and that it's like the Cold War in the 50s and
Yes.
60s. It's just to increase weapons sales. I hope that's the case. I'm not necessarily against weapons sales as long as you don't use them and kill innocent people.
Well, the problem is that weapons are very expensive, and the countries that are buying them, including our own, have to divert money away from other things like infrastructure and industrial development and so forth. And, countries have spent themselves into bankruptcy buying too many weapons, the Soviet Union being a good example.
Yes. Another note, I saw that the guy, St. Patrick's Cathedral, had a professor who went into the cathedral with 2 cans of gasoline. But the good news is that he's not a Muslim. And so they can't blame Muslims for...
Yeah, when I read the story, he hadn't been identified. So this guy was a professor. I mean,
yes.
Are they saying
he was,
what it was he was planning on doing? I mean, he lied about his car being out of gas.
I don't know. His name was Mark, an Italian last name. But it's good news that at least they can't blame, a Muslim. So it's kind of good news in itself. But I don't know. He could just have been a deranged person. But we'll find out.
Well,
few
what
days.
I want to find out is if he was on prescription antidepressants. Anyway, Jim, Jim, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go.
Thank you.
We're going to
Have a
do
good
a
day.
shout out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to go right back to the telephones to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Before I get to my topic, you made an interesting comment to the previous caller about the pre-planning of events with the Notre Dame. How you would have expected to see, demonization, everything all set up for Macron if it was in fact a false flag. And I would like to just call your attention to the fact that while the fire was going, they were saying that it was an accident, that it was done by the people that were doing the rehabilitation work. And to me, that in itself is a quite odd, and that tells me that there was some programming that they would come up with this event excuse while they didn't even investigate. So I think
wait a minute. They were investigating. I mean, they basically went to the homes of these workers or these hotels where they were staying. They interviewed them, right as the fire was burning. So you can't say there wasn't an investigation taking place. And probably one of these workers said, I must have left something turned on. Could have been a solder pan. Could have been anything. But that's not the kind of stuff I'm talking about. It's like when we had 9/11 happen, and all the news was saying Osama bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, Osama bin Laden. Again, this just doesn't feel like it's the same thing. I really do think it's an accident. I think it's a tragic accident. I haven't seen anything to convince me that there's anything nefarious. Now, as that last caller said, it's going to take a while for a full investigation. Right now, they can't even get up there to where the fire actually began because they're going to have to, first of all, replace the scaffolding, and then they'll be able to get up there and take a look at what's going on. Plus, a lot of what was up there is now, of course, on the floor of the cathedral, some 100 feet below, I think it is.
Yeah, well, I hope we get more of an investigation than we did get on 9/11, considering.
Yes.
That's the whole problem with false flags is the people that investigated are the people that perpetrated it.
Yep.
So, but anyway, what I wanted to call about was an off topic, and that is reparations.
Yep.
When I hear about reparations, I think that we should give them, 40 acres and a mule. I mean, let's give them. We have plenty of federal land that's just locked up, not doing anything.
Yep.
And I say take parts of Utah or Nevada, some of those huge swaths of land, and give people. Why should it come out of the taxpayer's pocket, who really had no slaves or had nothing to do with it? But I can see the United States government saying, something, in our past we had laws that were wrong and were wrong for black people, and we should make good on this and take federal lands and divvy them up and say, if you have ancestry that goes back to, the pre-Civil War, that we're going to give you a parcel of land and you can sell it, you can develop it, you can do what you want with it. And I think that would be a fair way to deal with this whole reparations issue, not coming into the average American innocent person's pocket, but at the same time, the country could make amends to, a wrong that was done to these people.
Yeah, but
and, in a way that
here's my problem, okay? I did not commit the wrong against those people. This whole thing about reparations,
right, and you're not,
this is just cheap political pandering and playing the race card, and it's basically trying to buy votes with a promise that they're going to take money away from people who were never slave owners to give to people who were never slaves. And that's basically what it is. It's an attempt to buy votes. Vote for me, we're going to take money away from Whitey, and we're going to give it to you.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't discredit the fact that the black people, through history, have been, wronged by the laws and the nation.
They were wrong. Hang on, they were wrong, but they're all dead now. There's nothing there is no redress. They're all dead.
Well, I think that, I mean, for instance, when you're a rich white kid, it's not you that made it. It was your ancestors that came through that were able to provide you with the bounty of going to good schools, living in good neighborhoods, and things like that. And you were, your ancestors had an advantage back 200 years ago that you reaped the benefit of. And that is why I think that by giving the federal lands, it's not costing anybody really anything except the federal government, which should have, not allowed this to begin with. That's my way of redressing this grievance, and I think that black people do have a grievance in the way that they were treated.
Black people have been told they have a grievance. Black people are being told this is an issue. There's a dollar sign hanging over it, and it's being used to solicit their votes. That's all it is. It's shameful election. Let me give you my usual counter example. Back during the antebellum era, my ancestors on my mother's side lived in New England, and our family never owned slaves. In fact, we ran a station on the Underground Railroad, helping escaped Southern slaves get to Canada, because under state law, even though slavery was forbidden, slaves were still considered property, and they had to be returned to their Southern owners. So the Underground Railroad was set up to, they would hide out during the daytime, and at night they would be passed on to the next station in the Underground Railroad, following the drinking gourd and all the rest of that. Now, if I were to go up to Canada today and find the descendants of those escaped slaves that had been held by my ancestors, and I were to knock on their door and say, you owe me money for what my ancestors did for your ancestors, what do you think the reaction would be? They'd laugh me off the porch, and rightly so, okay? I had nothing to do with the Underground Railroad. Had I been alive back then, I probably would have, but I wasn't. And I can't take credit for what my ancestors did, nor will I accept the blame for what my ancestors have done. Okay, I refuse to be held responsible for anything that takes place before I was born or that happens outside my immediate area of control. And so this whole reparation situation, it's just cheap politics. Okay, vote for me.
But nobody's trying to blame you or punish. That's my whole point, is that the government of the United States did wrong black people.
Yeah, and where's the government of the United States going to get the money to make reparations? They're going to raise taxes. Anyway, Joe, we got to
they're going to give federal lands. That's my point.
Joe, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials.
All right,
we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And following up on our phone call with Joe in Tennessee, and he's out there glibly talking about, we'll just, carve off parts of Nevada and Utah and give them to the black people, and that will be the reparations. There are some practical considerations. First of all, there's no infrastructure out there. If you really want to basically say you can have a new home, there's actually a place out in California called California City, which is actually the state's third largest city. And it was a failed real estate development, but the roads are already in. So you've already got the grid pattern laid out, and all it's going to take is building some homes out there. But he talks about 40 acres and a mule. I'd rather doubt that most urban black people would want to trade their urban existence to be out there as a homesteader. I really do. I think it's very impractical. And by the way, when you talk about reparations, something that has to be factored in is to look at how the descendants of the slaves are living today versus the descendants of those who were not captured and enslaved back in Africa. And if you compare the two, you will find out that the descendants of America's slaves have a much better lifestyle. It doesn't justify what was done to their ancestors, but if you're going to talk about reparations, the first thing you have to do is subtract out the obvious added benefit of having grown up in the United States of America with better health care, better access to education, better access to clean water, and so forth and so on. All right, let's go back to the phones here to Mark in Montana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael. I'm going to talk about two things, and I'll make it really quick.
Okay.
Number one, the border, and I've made this challenge before. Anybody that feels we do not need a wall, I will personally take them on a tour. All they need to do is fly into Midland, Odessa. I will pick you up. I will take you to some real interesting places on the border. You need to get out and mingle for 10 minutes with the peaceful migrants. I promise not to use my scary gun, send you, and then I'll take you back, except I don't think you're going to come back. So you probably only need a one-way ticket. Number two is the unemployment crisis. We have such a lack of workers out here in West Texas, where I work. I'm from Montana, but I work out here 20 days a month, and then I get 10 days off. That some of the local, I saw a sign at the Dairy Queen that was paying $18 an hour plus benefits. We've talked about this quite a bit on some of the chat boards relating to employment out here. And if you can just get out here, spend one day driving around, putting out your application, you will have a job the next day. I'm short 5 employees, truck drivers, and I'm paying $32 an hour, and I can't find them. And that's with making 70 hours a week, give or take, with benefits, and we're paying a housing allowance. I don't know what to do. I can't even find them. I'm advertising all over the country. Nobody wants to work. I honestly disagree with you when you say there's a lack of
I'm
jobs.
tempted to send you a resume myself.
Buddy, if you had a CDL, I'd hire you in a heartbeat, and you could actually do your show from the truck on your iPhone. The problem is I'm kind of specialized in that I need they need to be have a CDL with heavy haul experience, moving oversized, overweight loads. But if you were just to fly here and go around and pass out resumes, you have a job within a day.
Yep.
It's ridiculous. People will not. Granted, look, I'm looking out my window at nothing, okay? But people, in a lot of cases, don't want to work. The average unskilled worker out here that works for me is making $100,000 a year, and that's at 19 or 20 years old. And people just don't want. I'm honest when I say this. They don't want to work. Number one, and number two, they can't pass a damn drug test. So I'm just letting people know. Come to Midland, Odessa. Get yourself about 30 resumes. All you got to do is drive down 191 and pass them out, and you'll have a job the next day.
Well, that sounds like a really good place for people to be moving to. And like I said, Claire and I are committed to moving back to the mainland come the fall. And, we're just, we're going to be heading up more toward the Indiana area and just try and find a nice little place, no stairs, where we can live there.
Well, I'll tell you what, buddy. If you get up to Indiana, my girlfriend and I, she lives on Long Island. I commute every month and go stay with her for a few days, and we'll come visit you. We're not creepy or we don't stalk anybody. We have good jobs. And
love to have you.
And I used to be a professional. I used to be a professional chef, and I will cook for you. That's the only requirement I have. If I come visit, I want to cook for you.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate that. Anything else?
Michael, you have a great Easter, and I wish everybody out there a blessed Easter also.
Yes, that's true. We're coming up on that. Tomorrow, of course, is going to be Good Friday. The Lady Claire will be joining us. So, Mark, thank you. We're going to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. We have more callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go back to the phones here, I got an interesting little email here saying that if reparations are to be paid to descendants of people who were brought over to the U.S. to become slaves, shouldn't the first in line be the descendants of the Irish? So you can get going with this reparations thing. It can get really out of control. My family on my father's side was abused by the Inquisition. Shouldn't I be owed reparations by the Catholic Church? You can see how out of hand it becomes. All right, let's go back to the phones here to Davey in Texas. Aloha, Davey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, man, it's a pretty long list, but doesn't look like we're going to have time to cover it all. But I think the guilty parties ought to pay, really and truly. And, you mentioned the word accidental in relation to that fire over there. And You remember you used to have that photograph on your website of the initial assault, the Branch Davidians. It was taken by Rod Adelaide, and there was holes all in the front of that building, especially on the second floor up there.
Yes.
Did you ever see that film, Waco: A New Revelation?
Oh, yes.
That Dr. Frederick Whitehurst right at the beginning.
Yep.
Well, you know, I actually called up there to the FBI when the assault occurred and reported the ATF to the FBI. and I spoke to a guy in the crime lab because I wanted to have the FBI crime stats available, you know, and he actually sent them to me. And, you know, what it is that people get all emotional in the rush to, you know, form an opinion right away based on the emotional contrived event, whatever it is.
Yep.
And I would suggest that, you know, there's a lot of innocent blood been spilled on the North American continent.
Yes.
It wouldn't hurt really to make a good faith effort to see that justice is done, because that was originally the purpose for forming the so-called government. But as you know, this Federal Reserve System that was accidentally set up by the most pernicious economic terrorists in the history of the world.
Yes.
They also have a cult compound over there in Palestine that's full of people who are seriously deluded. And the fact that Moses didn't have a copy of the Talmud and hate Jesus, and he wasn't a proselyte to Talmudic Judaism. So there's no reason for them to pretend to be the children of Israel, because they're just not. And I find it really offensive that there are people who are Semitic in a concentration camp being mass murdered by real terrorists who have, you know, legerdemained and stolen, you know, not just billions, but trillions from the American people. They're deliberately stupid. And, you know, a lot of the blame lies on the American people themselves for being deliberately stupid.
Yes.
Anyway, Michael, if I have...
Okay, you kind of faded there at the end. Was that a goodbye? I guess it was, and we're going to switch over to Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, yeah, this thing about reparations, I agree with you that it's pandering for votes, but actually, this is just the Democrats doing this in the primary. This is never going to actually go anywhere. They will never come to an actual vote in Congress, because it's totally unconstitutional. And like you say, there's no practical way to take the money from this white person, but not this other white person like that. I mean, it's just all, and politicians love issues like this because all it is posturing.
Yes.
They're saying, I like black people, and the black people say, hey, this guy likes me, I guess I'll vote for him. You know, and if they don't get they're thinking, well, if they don't get the reparations, maybe I'll get something else, you know. And yeah, it's just a total BS political thing. But this will never actually go anywhere. It's just for the Democratic primaries that they're trying to talk about this.
Well, you know, they've been talking reparations now for like years, and you're right, it's never gone anywhere. And it is. It's just campaigning for votes. They're playing the race card. They're reinforcing the victimhood of the black population by saying, you're victimized several generations removed. But again, if you look at blacks living in the United States of America today versus blacks living in pretty much all of Africa today, you'll realize that the descendants of the American slaves actually got it pretty good. And as I said, that doesn't justify the slavery, but if you want to talk about reparations, you have to take that fact into account, that because they were here in the United States, they've actually had a much better life than they would have had if they'd stayed back in Africa. And so again, I refuse to accept guilt or blame for anything that happened before I was born, or anything that happens over which I have no direct immediate control. So I reject this idea of collective guilt or collective responsibility for anything. Okay, and I'm in favor of, let's find the guilty party, and in this case, the case of slavery, they're all dead. and so are the slaves. And I'm sorry, but as the courts would say, there is no remedy possible.
This politicians posturing and acting like they're virtue signaling, posturing, whatever you want to call it. They love an issue like that where nothing is ever actually going to happen. They can just talk. It's just all. It's a fake
You're
issue.
right. That's all it is. It's talk, and again, you're right. The black voters are going to vote for them with that promise of money somewhere down the road, and they're never going to get it. They're never going to get it. I mean, look at all the things we were promised by Trump. That's not happening either. And
all politicians are crooks, basically. Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, you got it. And we're going to switch to Miles in Maine. Aloha, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon. You know, I just object to such clownish commentary by some of the comments made. We're going to give the land to the Irish, and we're going to give them Utah and Nevada to the Negro. Let's not forget the American Indian that was slaughtered, killed, and destroyed over this land, and now we're going to decide who to give it to after them when it was their land?
Yep.
How outrageous.
I agree.
I mean, what non-clear thinking is that? Let's give it to the Irish and give it to the Negro and all these people that came 4, 5, 6, 700 years later than the people that they stole it from, killed, murdered, and destroyed.
It's just jingoism. You know, it sounds good in a soundbite, but it hasn't been thought all the way through.
Yeah, well, that doesn't bother me because the liberals never surprise me, but some of the callers calling in and making such suggestions on this network surprises me. But thank you so much, Michael, and keep up the great job. Everybody, don't forget to contribute to RBN. We need you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the comments, and thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open. Getting on back to our news here. The state of Ohio recently had a massive bust of the Sinaloa cartel. And state legislators are utilizing many of Judicial Watch's arguments to persuade the federal government to designate Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, which I think would make sense. They're certainly not state actors. And if Trump can designate Iran's Republican Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, he certainly can do that for the drug cartels. And this, of course, is going to be a litmus test because we know there's a lot of drug money corruption within the United States government. That's really what powers the deep state. And it goes all the way back at least to Vietnam. And it was certainly taking root inside Arkansas back in the 1980s with Iran-Contra. And that forms the core of the Clintons' rise to power, was all that CIA drug money that was coming on in. So Ohio has introduced this resolution asking the government to declare these drug cartels as foreign terror organizations. And it will be interesting to see if the federal government agrees or if they are somehow persuaded not to just leave them alone. I remember one of the Tom Clancy books, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but the gist of the story was that the president declared an actual covert war on the drug cartels, or at least on one of the drug cartels, literally with weapons of war. And when you look at the harm that is being done to our country with this flood of drugs, I think it would be legitimate to say we are in a state of war. We've been told there's a war on drugs. Let's fight it as a war. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Mark in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mark, are you there?
Okay, here you are. Okay, I'm here now. Okay. Concerning my call is concerning the reparations, the idea of the reparations for the black people. It so happens, and I discovered this 2 years ago, that my great-great-grandfather was in the Civil War. He was mustered in 63. May of 64, he was in the Battle of the Wilderness. He was captured, taken prisoner, Andersonville, Georgia.
Ooh, wow. Bad stuff.
Bad stuff. And by the way, there is a movie, and you can watch it on YouTube. It's called Andersonville. I believe it was made in the late 70s, early 80s. It's almost 3 hours long. I encourage everybody to watch it because it shows the horrific conditions of that prison. There was 45,000 men that went through the prison. It was an open-air prison. It was 65 acres approximately, and there was a creek running through the prison. And within a short time, that creek got contaminated. And out of the 45,000 men that went through the prison, close to 13,000 died within weeks of entering the prison walls because they would drink from the stream. And my great-great-grandfather was there shortly after being captured on May 5th of 1864 through the end of April 1865. Okay, he survived 11 months in hell.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Now, he happened to be German. My original name was Wirth, W-I-R-T-H. Okay. Now, so here's the thing. He, as well as the other prisoners there, what did they suffer for? Well, we're told that the whole Civil War was about slavery, which was, I don't believe, the truth.
No, it wasn't.
It was used as a political ploy later to get the North to go along with it. And by the way, they had to enact the draft. That's forced service in order to get Northerners to become involved.
Yes.
In the war, right? So
that led to riots in New York.
Right, exactly. So what did my great-great-grandfather suffer for? He suffered for standing up for the rights of the possibility for all men to be free in this country. That's the best I can muster with what So what about his suffering? And what about the suffering of the other 32,000 men in just that one prison and their offspring? Okay? And by the way, he got a severe case of piles. I guess it's dysentery, but back then they called it piles.
Yes.
And he appealed. He appealed to the War Department at that time. I guess this was the War Department. Now it's the VA, okay? And he was denied. He was denied.
Yes.
Back then. See, so the VA's been denying forever, okay? They don't care about their soldiers. They don't care about us common folk putting us in harm's way and getting shot and killed, okay? Brothers against brothers, family against families in some places, especially in Missouri where I'm originally from. But it turned out that he had to appeal that. So he went before this board, and he had letters from these several doctors that proved that he had the piles, and he was basically asking for a $20 pension, for his which might be what would that be today? Maybe a couple $100 or I don't know. It might be several $1,000s, but still they denied him. So before this board, they said, "Well, how we see you have the letters here, but where are the doctors?" And his comment was, "Well, there was a war on, and they both got killed. They got killed, right?"
Yep.
So the VA. What I'm saying is this government does not support those that they would put in harm's way for what purpose? It's at the end of the day, like you say, all wars are bankers' wars, and that war was sponsored on both sides by the same people, from what I gather, the Rothschilds, to basically try to take down America and then supplant the idea of the corporation, which then turned us all into slaves to the corporation. I mean, we're all indebted to corporations. I mean, corporations are running the world. They're destroying our free speech through these corporations, Google, Facebook. So, and how do we have any control over them? Do we have any, can we, they're chartered in the United States, and we, the people, are the ones that grant them these charters, but yet we can't shut them down. Can't Trump shut them down? I don't get it.
Well, in theory, organization issuing the charter can always revoke it, but like the charter with the Federal Reserve was granted by Congress, Congress is beholden to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a very generous campaign donor, and so it's a totally corrupted system. But getting back to the original story, yeah, the U.S. government kind of turned its back on the veterans of the Civil War and just ignored them. Same thing with the veterans of World War I, which led to another altercation in Washington, D.C., the bonus tent city, which had to be, which was literally ridden down by cavalry to drive them off.
Yeah,
So-
and you know who led that?
I forget off the top of my head.
Douglas MacArthur. And you know who was
You're
his
right.
underling? Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Eisenhower was MacArthur's underling. Eisenhower, and he was told by Hoover. Hoover told MacArthur, do not attack the vets. Just try to disperse them. But MacArthur went in and killed several. Set the
Yeah,
tents on
he
fire.
did. All right, well, listen,
so
Mark, we got to
anyway, I'll
take a
leave it at
break
that.
for a commercial break. Thank you very much for the phone call and the history lesson. We're going to let you go, and we'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. And the Rutherford Institute has gotten itself involved in this case down in Texas. And it involves this Texas man who is facing up to a year in prison and a $4,000 fine. Now, what did he do to risk that kind of punishment? Well, he was basically sending emails to police criticizing them for failing to respond to his requests for assistance. Now, we know the courts have already ruled that the police are not actually under any obligation to come help you, to intervene in a violent crime. It's sort of, they show up if they feel like it, and you're just going to have to deal with that. But this idea that somebody who criticized them for not showing up could face a year in jail and $4,000 fine. Talk about stepping on the First Amendment. And apparently this is being done under a Texas law that bans annoying or offensive electronic messages. So Rutherford Institute attorneys have argued that the prosecution of this man, Scott Ogle, for sending complaints to a sheriff's office, including one email stating that the officials were pissing on the Constitution, violates the First Amendment safeguard for freedom of speech and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances, and it certainly does. I mean, that is just utterly ridiculous. Okay, over in the world of Jeffrey Epstein, apparently yet another woman has come forward to accuse Epstein and his companion Ghislaine Maxwell of molesting her and her then 15-year-old sister back in 1996 at the Ohio mansion of billionaire limited brand CEO Les Wexner. This is reported in the Miami Herald. And apparently Harvey Weinstein's attorney is accused of trafficking kids for Jeffrey Epstein. What a bunch of scumbags they all are. All righty. Apparently over at an abortion clinic in Kentucky, in fact, it's the only one they have left, there was this elderly female pro-life counselor. She was attacked by a younger woman outside the abortion clinic, leaving the elderly woman with a broken leg that required surgery and a bleeding head. And I love the way the liberals are always screaming about how dangerous conservatives and Trump supporters are, and yet they're the ones committing acts of violence. So apparently this woman, Donna Durning, was a counselor for over 20 years, was outside the EMW Women's Surgical Center in Louisville when a younger woman who'd been inside the clinic crossed her path. And apparently the woman looked at the counselor and said, oh, well, there's the music. Okay, anyway, inappropriate response. inappropriate response. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please share what you learn on the show and at the website with everybody that you know. And donate to Republic Broadcasting. They need it. Donate to What Really Happened. We need it. We'll see you tomorrow. Aloha, America.